What did you learn from that? There was nothing learned. He was humiliated. I was called on the carpet by my manager, and I'm sure there is an unwritten protocol about going to the men's room during keynote.
You have a long mic on or something?
Right. You're right. The echo from the men.
Thanks for sharing.
It's the only time I've ever had an interaction with men.
I have actually kind of. When I first, actually, I started with Apple at Apple Germany in 1988, and I was very excited at the prospect of getting the job. And when they asked me if I spoke German, I told them that I had taken 4 years of German in college, and I was just a little rusty, and I'm sure it would just take a matter of a few months to get up to speed. I didn't speak a word of German at the time. And the hiring manager on the other end of the line had indicated to me that, well, it probably wasn't that big of a deal for him that there would be time to get up to speed, but he was very comfortable with the fact that I did have some ability to speak German before I came on board. So the lesson that I've learned from this is never, ever, ever tell people that you have skills that you do not have, because then I was asked to do a presentation in front of a couple of hundred people about 3 months into my job there, and I then at that time had to fess up that I probably couldn't do it in German, and could I please do it in English?
What did they say?
That was fine, actually. That worked out okay. But the lesson here is definitely represent your skills honestly to those who are hiring you.
And that goes internally and externally.
Exactly. Exactly. That's with developers. Don't tell developers that you can be something for them that you cannot be. I think is very important.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. We all sort of have our own perspectives. A lot of this has been focused on, well, I really suit up to the management, or I suit up my developers. Well, you can there's all sorts of ways to screw up, and you can certainly screw up with your support staff and all the people that help to try and make you look good by just not even really thinking about them. So screw-ups of omission. And I know I definitely fell sort of victim to that, and was sort of complaining about an event that actually had gone quite well to the events manager, and looked over and saw like the events crew just steaming, all smoking. I didn't realize they all smoked. Boy. And then I sort of walked up and I got, simultaneous, like, the tractor beam hate stares. It's like, we're going to be in for shit, and you put us there, and we're here to make you look good. It's just, it was very much of a realization that, boy, I'm part of the team, and it's very important to make sure that you have the positive feedback both ways, and you have a good understanding. So, in terms of, like, we're trying to set up a buddy system here, and I really think that your first 3 months in evangelism, your buddy is actually your AA, because they know all the scuttlebutt. They know what's right and what's not, and really you can learn a lot there. So,
Evangelist also, at least when I was there officially 2 months ago, making mistakes or messing up it happens. It's not that big a deal.
Yes, the Suzanne, the other lesson was to confess when you, that confession is goodness.
Well, yeah, and what you learn, you remember how you felt, and therefore you never do that again.
Well, the encouraging thing is that all of you have made mistakes and you're all still here. So that helps us with
It's sort of this bank account. When you have credits, you can debit from the bank account.
I haven't told you guys about my mistakes, but I also once sent John Scully a link.
No, really?
I better send one.
The interesting thing is that, just as an aside, I have this very good engineer reporting to me now, Julian Gomez, and Julian said, Fabio, now that I'm working at Apple, I really would like to send John Scully a link, to say hi and whatever, and then what we were doing, and they said, go for it. I really did.
Is this one of your friends, Marvin?
And John replied saying, I'm glad to see that the project's moving and all that kind of stuff. So what happened was that...
Did you say education was the key to the work?
Yes. The opposite of mistakes. That's right.
No, the reason why I sent John that link was because I was very, very frustrated I am a very, very passionate about what I do, otherwise I wouldn't be here, basically. And very emotional. And there was this key project, the one that I'm managing now, that in engineering that was not moving forward. I mean, it was in the process of being destroyed, literally. And nobody was paying any attention at all. So I sent out the link. I mean, this guy from ATG sent me a link copying the whole world. So I replied to him copying the whole world, basically, And saying that's the way that a project should be done, because I've done that before, and I said, I'm not saying that I am going to do it. I'm just saying that this is the way that I think it should get done, And then when I was in the process of saying send, you guys gotta understand that I have a split personality, okay? Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde.
Yeah.
So Mr. Hyde kicked in, and Mr. Hyde said, send it to John as well. And I knew what was gonna happen. I mean, you gotta understand that I did that on purpose, okay? I knew what was gonna happen.
The roots of self-destructive behavior.
And then I said, send, and they quit Apple Inc. and I went home. It was about 4 o'clock. Next morning.
Morning or evening?
4 o'clock in the afternoon, whatever. Next morning, I am working here, and Scott Schnell comes, and he reams me badly in public. I mean, I said to myself,
I can vouch, I was in the next queue.
yes, I'm gonna lose my job. And the interesting thing was that people surrounded me, like, you and you guys were kind of pretending, Jim Lanahan, that you were oh God, this guy's gonna get fucking whatever.
Excuse me, Fabio, oh, you're busy, sorry.
And then what happened was that Scott said, come to my office. So he took me to his office, he closed the door and he said, you want a beer? I swear to God, you guys might want to ask Scott Schnell. Okay? And then Scott said, okay, I understand why you did it, but see, there is a little bit of damage control you got to do here, so I want you to talk with these 2 people to settle things, and they did that, and everybody was pretty happy. But the interesting thing was that half hour after I fixed the whole situation, Jonathan Fader, who was my manager at that time, he comes to me, tries to ream me, and I said, Jonathan, I'm sorry, I spoke with your manager, and it's all done, so talk to him, and I don't care. But aside from
How'd that go?
But aside from that, I think that a mistake that I've made is that, again, I'm very passionate, very emotional, and I sometimes get very upset when things don't move. And maybe I'm too sensitive with respect to time. I know that there are a lot of very young people in this room, a lot of people, I'm 39, so.
It's a great age.
Yeah. The point, my friends, is that, every morning when I kind of wake up, I have 86,400 seconds, and I got to do something about those seconds, okay? And if I see time slipping by, I get very, very upset. So sometimes, thinking back, I think that I was very critical on certain people, not necessarily in this room here, because I thought, and I still think, that they were not doing their jobs. Would I do it differently? Now that I am a manager, I have different responsibilities. So I have to be a little bit more diplomatic than I used to be before. But I really tried my best to make this company move forward. And I don't know, maybe it was my mistake being myself. And see, a lot of people kind of misunderstood me. Some people thought that some comments and remarks that I had made were either self-serving, and I hate this term, for Christ's sake, self-serving, or that I was being too hard on people, But I was just trying to be me, the best that I could, basically.
That's, I think, one of the most, actually, that's one of the most interesting pieces of sort of the unwritten code of behavior here is that conflict, being direct, deliberately creating conflict, you get stuff out on the table. I think there are a number of things where people who really want to move the ball forwards and have the expectation working on high-performance teams often run into the culture here. And I'm not sure what the answer is besides just chilling out or finding other like people and just working with them and around the rest of the organization, which I think that is probably the strategy that you figured out. but it is, I think, the most difficult thing for people who came in here hired with the expectation, come in, change the world as an open company, and they come in and they try to do that. And I've watched, in terms of people who have failed in evangelism, who were good people and should have been successful, that was the thing that killed them. That and not sitting on the links, writing links when they were still heated up and not waiting till the morning to send them. I won't mention names, but I can think of 5 or 6 people who were real assets both to evangelism and Apple Computer, who had every right to be successful here and could not resolve our cultural aversion to conflict, directness, and some of those and related subjects. And so advice to anybody in this room who really feels like they've got a fire under their ass to go out and change the world, or make 3D happen on Macintosh. That is where you're most likely to fail because of your own internal frustration level, and then how that frustration manifests itself in relationships with other people, political fallout, and that kind of stuff.
But Ford, I mean, if you pick the area you want to make, I mean, you can't change the world, but you may be able to change your town. I mean, you really can make it. I still believe you can really make a difference.
You can. I think you need to be very aware, be self-aware, and aware of the mixed messages that someone brought up about Apple, our myths, and then who we in fact really are, and how you get into trouble here, because you can get into trouble here. I have been in tons of trouble here. I'm probably still in trouble here, and will be in trouble tomorrow. So, for a link I said, well, I was upset today. So, I can't. In terms of this conversation, I would say that it's the most difficult and most subtle thing about being in evangelism and the power of those mixed messages.
It sounds like what you're saying is to know when to blast ahead on your own, and to know when to sign up other people, whether they're peers or your management, to help you change the world.
There are a number of effective strategies. Finding like people and working together as a Skunk Works team. Soliciting people who have the political acumen that you don't have the passion to. You can't bring yourself to be that dispassionate. You say, you go work this with so-and-so because I will become apoplectic or start screaming.
Mm-hmm.
Or to learn self-moderation. And maybe it's some combination of those strategies, but I see it as the source of most failure.
It's sort of like, if I were to, for some reason, the analogy for me about evangelism is you have to have like a knife that can cut. A lot of people I've seen, they had a jagged knife and they actually tore a lot and ended up failing because they couldn't keep away from the potholes. And some just dull their blade and then they're effective. So how do you make sure that you're still effective without doing more damage along the way?
Right.
I don't think people look back enough.
In terms of other areas for failure too, it's interesting. There's, I think, a tension between managers and individual contributors, where managers are torn between wanting people who will move the ball forwards, make them look good, and gain credibility for the department, and their absolute fear of death from above when things go wrong. And you live in a constant tension with your manager around that, and I think that it's really important that you invest a lot in your manager's trust in you, so that when the poopy hits the fan, which it will if you are the kind of person who's pushing the envelope, that they ultimately have underlying confidence in you. Poopy? My son just used his body for the first time yesterday. Yeah, I'm a father, so.
Well, this comes close though.
So, and then the other one is the other tension with managers that leads to failure is constantly wanting to go to your manager and say, tell me what I'm supposed to do. There's a tension between looking for direction. There's no plan. What's Macintosh supposed to be? Apple doesn't have a direction. And all the frustration that breeds all the way down to your manager, and they can't even tell me what to do. What possible value can they be added, and the frustration that causes. With their expectation of you, sort of having been on both sides of this fence of, look, don't whine at me, come to me with solutions, bring me, and I think that there's a lot of laziness on the part of the individual contributor community about really thinking through, here's the problem, coming up with alternatives, pre-evaluating it, telling your manager why it's the right one, alternatives considered and rejected, and then getting your manager's support, as opposed to just saying, what am I supposed to do? Or I'm upset about this. And if you learn that discipline, which in some measure I think I have as an individual contributor, and as a direct report to people above me, that begins to create the trust, so that you are able to articulate to your intelligence and your ability to think and reason, so that basically this is a sound person. And that when you do have problems, they have that confidence in your soundness as an individual, and that they will want to help you survive the crisis. I really crapped out in front of Randy Patat this year, and Scott had enough confidence in me that he really went out of his way to help me recover from that stumble. And without that confidence in me, he would have said, Ford, maybe we need to have a talk about where you can make a more effective contribution now or elsewhere.
Anybody else like
addiction?
Anybody want to?
I was going to say, before everybody becomes afraid of writing John Scully, that I feel like you're like a cat with 9 lives. And I've been here 2 weeks, and I got my Apple Inc. account. And I said, good, and it was unfinished business from what I've been doing before I joined Apple. And the deal that I was trying to put together, bottom line was they kept saying, well, it's up to John Scully. And they were passing the buck. So I wrote a link to John Scully. And I said, dear Mr. Scully, I know your plate's full and I wouldn't normally bother you at all, but this is unfinished business. And it was a 1-pager and it was bullets on why it was good for Apple. And the next day I came back from lunch and the receptionist said, there's a call for you from John Scully. And I said, great. And I picked up the phone and it was his secretary. She said, he got your link and you should be receiving an Apple link. And I said, thank you. And then I looked at it and it was a carbon copy, and it was from the guy who I was blasting, saying it was John Scully, And it was the cover of your butt, like from him, saying, dear John, if he'd bothered to contact me, he would have found out blah, 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 blah. So I used up one of my 9 lives with this person, Bruce Mallon. And, but the bottom line you should hear is that $1 million deal went through as a result of the concept. And so we were winners, and I don't care if Bruce is upset.
It's the silver bullets.
Yeah, so pick your targets wisely, and you're safe if you're right.
And run really fast.
I one time sent a link out to Evengelism that was titled "Bill Gates is the Devil," and I was the Microsoft evangelist at the time, and someone in the group forwarded it to Scully. And luckily, when the RE got put in front, or there was something that got put in front, it knocked off the I and the L, so it read Bill Gates is the dev. And I thought, Bill Gates is the developer. That's right, that's what it is. Don't send links titled Bill Gates is the developer to a large number of people.
I'm just curious, speaking of 9 lives, I have this burning question. I think this conversation has been great for no matter what reason we get our paycheck here. But is there a high turnover rate in evangelism?
Yeah.
I'm sworn to not comment for this.
People have been here for a month or less.
A month or
A
less?
month or less.
No.
Has been.
No, it's not that.
To answer your question, I would estimate the time I've been here, that the department has turned over at least 200%, and maybe more.
And how long
And
have
how
you been
long
here?
have you been?
5 years?
More than that.
Is it 300%? Yeah, 4?
Yeah, how many evangelists have been in the department over more than 2 years? So, as you can see, it's a smattering. I
It
think
probably
part
goes
of
down
it-
quickly.
Part of it is because people who are in evangelism tend to do very well and go off and do new things, as evidenced by the panel here. People from being promoted out and going elsewhere.
But
Part
not
of it is-
forgetting where their roots are.
Part of it is that it is such a challenging position that people get into the throes of it, and after a couple of years, they just find it's not their cup of tea, and move into something else that's more suitable. It's not
Is
a
that
bad thing,
burnout?
it's just
Is
that-
it-
Some people
is
suffer
that-
from burnout and don't recover. I mean, it's a very addictive and powerful team to be a part of. And because of the effectiveness of the team, sometimes we get pulled into things that are not really part of our charter, but are good for the company, and because the thing really executes, the division really executes, we end up doing this, taking on some of these roles. But yeah, it's a real bleeding edge type group.
I'm going to ask just one last, there's a lot of different things, and again, I think we all feel, obviously, we're all pretty comfortable with talking about things, and if you have any other questions, ask people. But just to wrap up, I think Craig actually mentioned this. What do you know now that you wished you knew when you first started?
Remove on Apple Link.
That's right, we're all the Apple Link evangelists, really.
Let me make a first stab on this. As I said before, ignorance is bliss. So I had this romantic, in quotes, and Renaissance type notion of evangelism, change the world and all that kind of stuff, and I still believe in that. But as time went by, I noticed that evangelism was becoming more and more a business proposition, and there is nothing wrong with that, for Christ's sakes. Okay? But I felt that the same cohesion that there was here 3 years ago when I first started began to disappear. And I don't know exactly why. Maybe it was just a turnover, or maybe it was me, basically. But one of the things that I didn't know about evangelism was how frustrating it can be. I mean, it's very fulfilling, and I agree with your assessment. It is very, very addictive. It really is, because we are kind of empowered. We have in our hands kind of a lot of power. Like we can make or between quotes make or break a developer. We have the power to make sure that developers adopt our technologies. We hopefully have the power to bring back to Apple feedback from the customer base and developers. But there is something missing, and I don't know exactly what it is. Sometimes you work your butt off, and then at the very end, there is something missing out of that. So something more concrete, more tangible. Maybe it's just me, I don't want to overgeneralize. But I think that this explains why there is this big turnover, because people get frustrated. One of the things that I didn't know as well when I came here, and it was good that I didn't know, because since I didn't know, I was able to really make a difference, was that there is a clear separation between evangelism and product marketing and engineering and APG. And now that I work in engineering, I'm very grateful to see that people still invite me in meetings here in evangelism in Apple USA, so people have not forgotten me. But throughout Apple, there is this notion that evangelism is just a service organization. Evangelists are those guys, and they're wrong, okay? Evangelists are those guys who solve problems with developers. Evangelists are those guys who make sure that people adopt our technology. And you guys cannot imagine how people on my side of the fence are wrong, because you guys can make a lot of contributions, And but I had to spend a considerable amount of time, invaluable cycles, going through this BS, making sure that the people understood that evangelism was just more than a bunch of dweebs making sure that developers adopt our technologies, for Christ's sakes. But it took a heavy toll. I think that today I have a much hectic life. I work much more than I used to before. I don't travel as much. I don't travel at all, basically. Okay. I'm putting much longer hours. But on the other hand, I have something tangible. I have this project called Azure, 3D graphics on system software, that is going to either make it or break it. And I own this project. So I know when it's done that I have succeeded or not. And while an evangelist, that was missing. You sometimes don't know whether, have I really succeeded? I mean, when sometimes I got, a bunch of way to go awards and all that kind of stuff, and I said, why am I getting those awards? Have I done really something so great that deserved that award? Wasn't I hired just to do that? You know what I mean? So it's very frustrating, but I'm so grateful that I didn't know that before.
Well, something that Fabio said that Suzanne pointed out as well is we don't ship a box. We don't really ship anything. So something I didn't know when I came in fact, my first manager, I went to her after a couple of weeks and said, let's work on my MBOs. And she said, what? And I said, those things I need to accomplish against, so I'll know I've done the job and be able to objectively review. And to date, her group had never done those, so we kind of started a new thing. But one thing I didn't know was very similar, is that you have to be very self-motivating and self-congratulating. Scott puts it sometime that we don't really have time to slow down and appreciate the things that we've done. So you have to just make time to sit back and look at what you've done, and if your manager's not recognizing it, nudge them to possibly recognize it. But that is a good point that he brought out. I've been involved in other careers as an SE. SE has a very similar type of job. It's not, it doesn't really end, it just, you just refocus on different projects and problems. But to counter that, you have a lot of flexibility that I also wasn't aware of to move the company. I mean, at 6 months, I proposed that we introduce our high-volume, low-cost line of computers 3 days early, prior to announcing an SBA conference. Something that the company said we just don't do. And I didn't realize that you could really, I didn't know that I couldn't influence the company to do new things. So I just tried it and built a coalition across the company, and sure enough, we did it, and it was real successful. So that's something I didn't know that there were bounds that I couldn't go and change the course of the company, and that was kind of a cool thing.
When I got here as an evangelist, I'd say for the first 6 to 12 months, I didn't know how to get things done. And I know how to get things done now. I came into the company, having some success at other places, what have you, but getting things done at Apple, I found, and having worked at a number of other companies in the Valley, is somewhat unique. I mean, the skills you need or the strategies you need to employ to get things done here are somewhat unique. And there was a manager who used to be in our department who used to say it kind of takes you a year to figure out kind of how to be an evangelist, and your second year you're kind of hitting your stride, and the third year, if you're progressing, you're really excelling. And I don't think that's necessarily true. And I know one of the things I try to do with people who work for me is to sort of share with them what it is that I've learned that helps them get going more quickly. Not that I expect everybody to be a star in their first month, but I think that I came into the company kind of knowing how to get things done on my own. And I didn't know very well how to work through others. I didn't know very well how to manage conflict and some of those other things. And I think that I definitely wished I knew those things when I started, because I would have been much more effective earlier in my first year of working here, rather than spending most of my first year just sort of learning the ropes and understanding kind of what my job is. And I would have been more effective if I would have known those things, I think.
Anybody else?
I guess I wish I had known that Apple works, and Apple works really, really well. When I came here, we were about a $2 billion company, and now we are an $8 billion company. It's so, on the inside, it's so easy to get frustrated. You think how much is wrong, and if only we, and if there was a plan from the top, and if the EMT was someone else, and if managers, added value, and all this other stuff that can be, to Fabio's point, can be incredibly frustrating to this place. How are we going to make it? Microsoft. Every year I've been involved with this company, someone was going to kill us, right? There was the Mindset computer, remember them? And it's what it's going to be Windows, and now it's going to be NT, and in fact, as chaotic as it is, the company works. The processes that we have, as amorphously defined as they are, seem to function well. We continue to outperform the industry every year I've been here, and to go from $2 billion to $8 billion in that time period is phenomenally successful. Any other company would give their IT for that kind of performance. If I had known that, I would have, I think, put a lot less wear and tear on myself, directed my emotional energy more effectively towards projects where I was trying to make a difference, and basically enjoyed my time here, been a more fun person to work with. And so I would just predict that we will continue to be successful, and that it's just trust that and devote your energies constructively towards the things that you're trying to do to move that success forward.
Add something to this. And the question is, what do you know now that you actually when you first started? And that would be what I didn't know when I first started. But that is what people say about evangelism before you work in the group. I would say don't believe what you hear. And you have to feel it and be in it to know what it's like, because if you go in with some preconceived notions and ideas as to what you're going to work with and the people you're going to work with, then I think that really keeps you either down or you really aren't open to your own thought.
You must have been in DTS.
Well, I think you have to be an ADG to have a room or hear what it's like to work in evangelism. I mean, you just have to work anywhere in the industry to hear about evangelism. So my advice to anybody coming in is just go with an open mind. make it yourself.
Any final, oh, Ron?
One last one. 2 weeks ago, I went to Atlanta and did a briefing, and then I rented a truck and drove back with furniture across the country. And the lesson I learned was, it's a big country and they never heard of Apple. And it was a good reminder to me that we're always got to be on guard against Apple arrogance when we're talking to people on the phone or in Apple or anything else. They can do without us, and they may not have even heard of us. And so it was a sobering thought as I drove and kept running into places where people had never even thought about us. And so that's the thing. When I got to Apple the first day, I've been here 7 years, I thought it was like the United States, everybody's heard of Apple. And the more I survived working at Apple, the more I realized we've got a long way to go. But I agree that the ship will roll on, it will grow. It is a giant passenger liner, and if you decide it's time to leave and get in a rowboat and sail away, the ship will sail on. So it's relax and don't worry about the company failing. I think it's going to be fine.
Great. Thank you.
Great. I thought that was really useful for me. At times I had to restrain myself from jumping in, but I hope that was really rewarding for people. I'd like to thank Wendy and the group who got up here.